Good morning. Welcome first service. Today I want to speak to you about is it well with your soul? We're in the Second Kings, and last week, well, all these weeks, these pastors, these teachers have done an awesome job. In your little Bible that we have back there, that we'll be starting with chapter 4 and verse 8. And how's your week going? How many's had a rough week? Go ahead, raise your hand. Yeah, sometimes we have those rough weeks. What's happened in the story so far? You know, Elijah, he was the prophet. He was the man. He was the man of God. And there come a time that he was told by the Lord that he was going to be taken up. And so he's part of the school of the prophets. And so as a part of the school of the prophets, he had a young protege, you might say, that had heard about him, was involved with them, called Elijah. And he told Elijah, he said, Elijah said, well, I want what you got. Isn't that be something that you live for God in such a way people won't want you got? But he said, I want what you got. And he said, well, if you'll stay right with me and you're persistent and you stay by my side day and night, you stay there. And when the Lord takes me up, this mantle that's been upon me, this anointing that's been upon me will come down upon you. Well, Elijah was there. And all at once a whirlwind took him up. And this mantle, whether visible or invisible, I don't know, this mantle, I see something like floating down or some kind of mist comes down upon Elijah. And now he is now known as the resident man of God, you might say. How many think that's a lot of pressure? You know, there's a George Jones song like, who's going to fill their shoes? Like, who's going to fill, you know, if you've been Elijah, and, you know, you come along, who's going to fill Elijah's shoes? Well, now it's coming to the place that Elijah is trying to do that very thing. And in the process of that, it becomes very, very difficult. And at times, you'll see that he wonders if he's doing it right. You ever feel like if you're doing it right? How many of you heard of Facebook or you're on Facebook? Wave your hand. All right, you probably didn't know of Mark Zuckerberg. This is a guy that pretty much, he developed Facebook. And he was in the news some time ago because his stock went up 3.8 billion in a gain in 2-day period. That meant those 48 hours, he made $80 million an hour, or 21,000 every second. Kind of remind me, I went and saw the movie The Social Network. It was a story about Zuckerberg and his life. And his original partner, as they kind of developed this in college, his partner told him, hey man, we've got an opportunity to sell this for $1 million. We're 18 years old, we need to sell it. We need to sell it. And in the movie, the guy playing Justin Timberlake was playing the other guy's part. And he said, you shouldn't be thinking about millions of dollars. You should be thinking about billions of dollars. And currently, Zuckerberg's net worth some time ago was $16.8 billion. And at that time, he was 29 years old. He could have walked away from millions of dollars. He could have walked away with $1 million at age 20. But by 29, it was so much greater than that. So much greater than that. And here's the thing I want to talk to you today about. We face those kind of decisions, maybe not dealing with dollars and cents, but we face decisions where the decision we make is going to affect us for a lifetime. And we're not talking about something as temporary and as meaningless as millions and billions of dollars. We're talking about something that's way more important than that. We're talking about a life that matters for eternity versus one that is completely wasted. God offers something greater That's one thing he said, when this anointing comes upon you, Elijah, you're going to do greater things than I've even done. And I'm thinking, Elijah's probably going, I don't know how that's going to work. I don't know what you know. I haven't been where you've been. I don't have the schooling you've had. I don't know how that's going to happen. But God is offering something greater to you, but it's hard to obtain it because it takes patience. It's what it took for Elijah. It took patience, it took vision, it took faith, it took a delayed gratification. Most will never get hold of it. All your life will count just for down here on earth. And what we do here on the earth is just a drop in a bucket compared to eternity. I want to get into this passage today and look at this a little bit. God had promised to raise up after Elijah a prophet that would be greater than he was. And Elijah was that prophet. Elijah gives us a foreshadowing of Jesus, the greatest of all prophets. You know, I've talked a little bit, different ones have talked about Elijah has also embodied that promise given to us, that Jesus would use our lives to do greater things. Jesus promised in John 14 that we would do greater works than even he did. Greater works. I'm thinking, me, you? No, I don't think so. But he said we would. How many's wanting some greater stuff to go on in your life? I'm hungry for something greater. This world don't hold a lot of glamour for me. We're going to look at the scene from the story of Elijah's, and he shows us what kind of heart of a person receives the greater thing. I know, you say, well, I want a blessing. I want God to move in my life. But here's the thing. Do you have a heart? Do you have the kind of heart that will help you receive the greater thing in your life? It's going to be talking to you about a woman. Last week, Teresa was talking about a woman that was a poor woman. And she said, she was going to come get her sons because she was in poverty. And so she was very much in poverty. She's very poor. She had nothing. And he said, what do you have? And she said, I don't have anything but this little bottle of oil. And he said, that'll do. This story today is about a total different situation. This is a wealthy woman. In Hebrew, that's called Gadah, a great, powerful, wealthy person. This decision, though, she made a decision in the story that would change her life. It would change her life, and it would put her in a place for God to do something greater in her life than she ever anticipated. You know, there's nothing that you and I can do that can force God to move in our lives. We can't do anything to force God to move in our life. Jesus said that the movement of the Spirit is mysterious. Like the wind, you can't always tell where it comes from or when it's coming. And the moment somebody comes up with a formula that manipulates God, you know they're misleading you. You know, let's tell you their latest book of how to get this or how to get that. But think of it like this. You can put up the sail so when the wind blows, you can catch it. You know, I went sailing one time. I was in Florida, and this guy had a little sailboat, and I kept watching him go back. He came to shore, and I said, man, that's pretty cool. He said, you want to do it? I said, sure. I'd never been in a sailboat in my life. It's a little one-man. So I went out there, and this is on the Gulf, and I went out, and I'm doing pretty good. I catch the wind, and it's taking me further and further out. And then it dawned on me, that wind that's taking me out, how am I going to get back in? And I remember that he kept kind of going zigzag, and the wind would catch the sails at certain times. I got back to shore, but I didn't get back at the same place I left. So I get that the wind blows, and you got to, if you put the sail, but you can't get anywhere until you put your sail up. And so in this story, verse 8 of chapter 4, one day Elijah went to Shunem, where a wealthy woman lived. who urged him to eat some food. So whenever he passed that way, he would turn in there and eat food. Verse 9, she said to her husband, behold now, I know that this is a holy man of God who is continually passing our way. Let us make a small room on the roof with walls and put there for him a bed and a table and a chair and a lamp, so that whenever he comes to us, he can go in there. This woman, you know, we can't, like I say, we can't make God move in our lives, but we can make room for him to move. We got to make room for him to move. She made a place for the man of God. And God's really been dealing with me. You know, there's so many distractions. My grandfather used to plow a field with a mule. And he'd put these blinders on that mule where he could just see straight ahead. Because if he didn't, he'd get over and wander off this way and that way, and it would just be a crooked line. We waste a lot of time in life because distractions are taking us away from the move of God in our life. And it's very easy to be distracted in our society today. We've got one of these that dings about every few minutes and somebody's trying to get a hold of us. You ever been in like a little prayer time and ding and you stop your prayer time and then you don't even know what you're praying or what you were planning on praying? Come on, be honest today. And so this is how faith works. You can't manipulate the presence of God, but you can make him move in your life. You can't make him move in your life, but you can make room. And she made room in her life, and she expanded her home to include the man of God. I really feel like today that if we wanted to see God move in our life, we need to make room for God. We need to make room for God. We need to spend time for God, with God. I brought this little prayer shawl here, and the amazing thing, they in Israel, you see these people going around with these prayer shawls, and they'll wear them, and sometimes they'll go up to the wall, and they'll do like this, and they'll cover, and they can just see out right through the front, and they're there, and they're praying at the wall. And I don't know, maybe the person to the left or the right is distracting them, but they just do this and they just pray to the wall. We was on the airplane coming back, and we flew back into New York, and there was some these Jewish men on there, and on the plane at certain times, they would they had an app. Believe this, they have apps, and the apps would remind them it was time for them to pray all during the night. You know, at certain times. Whatever the time was in Israel, and if they're facing the right direction, they would look and see what was the right direction. Sometimes they would stand up on the plane and they'd go to a place over there and they would pray standing up. Sometimes they would just sit in their seat and they would bring this over the top of their eyes and they would just pray right there on the airplane. I thought that was amazing. I read about John Wesley. John Wesley's mother, she had 10 kids. How many believes if you had 10 kids, you would have a lot of reasons to get distracted? But she wanted to raise godly kids. She done homeschool with 10 kids, and she raised 10 kids. But every day at a certain time, she would take her apron that was around her, and she would throw it over her head. And when she threw that apron over her head, that would let her kids know, do not bother your mom. She's in prayer with God. You do not disturb me unless it's an emergency. In other words, she shut out the world. She shut out all the other concerns. But she had raised two of the greatest sons that has been known. John Wesley, kind of the founder in great Methodist church. And her other son wrote hymns. And but this woman made a decision one day that she was going to make room for God. She's going to make room for the man of God. And you know, sometimes we think about we want to make room for God when we're in a trouble or we're in need. But this woman wasn't in no need at this time. And so in verse 11, I'll kind of summarize it here. In other words, she was putting her cell up. She was making room for God. She was investing time. She was sacrificing. In verse 11, one time when Elisha was staying there, he says to Gehazi, his assistant, you know this woman has been so kind to us. What can we do? What can we do to thank her? So they suggested some things to her, and she really didn't have any needs. Like I said, she's wealthy. I don't need anything, you know. I'm very content. And so Gehazi, noticed, one thing she doesn't have. It's hard to find the right thing for a rich person, but one thing she doesn't have a son. And so Elijah tells her, this time next year, God's going to give you a son. I got a feeling if she would have never made room for God, this miracle wouldn't have been heading her way. If she had not put up this sail, the wind of God's Spirit would not have blew into her life and brought her a son. In verse 16, she said, don't lie to me. She was kind of a feisty woman. You talk to a prophet that way? Don't tease me. Don't lie to me. This is sensitive now. Having a child has been a dream of my entire life. And see, in that culture, having a child was everything, because to have a child meant you had kind of like Social Security. You had, when you get old, your son could take care of you. It carried on the family name, the family tradition. Verse 18, when the child had grown, he went out one day with his father among the reapers. And he said to his father, oh, my head, my head, my head. And the father said to his servant, carry him to his mother. That was a smart man right there. Most kids, when they're hurt, they don't want their daddy, they want their mama. And so take her to her mother. And so when he had lifted him and brought him to his mother, the child sat on her lap till noon. And then he died. Verse 21, and she went up and laid him on the bed of the man of God and shut the door behind him and went out. Then she called to her husband and said, send me one of the servants and one of the donkeys, that I may quickly go to the man of God and come back again. And he said, why you want to do that today? It's not a new moon. It's not a religious day. It's not the Sabbath. And she said, don't worry. It's all well. It's well. It's well. Now, she knew she just had a dead son laying on the prophet's bed, but she tells her husband, just get me the donkey. It's all well. Verse 25, so she set out and came to the man of God at Mount Carmel. We've been to Mount Carmel. That mountain, you'd be looking down, and there's not a lot of trees there. You could see somebody coming from a long distance. When the man of God saw her coming, he said to Gehazi, his servant, look, there is the Shunammite. Run at once and meet her and say to her, is it well with you? Is it well with your husband? Is it well with the child? And she answered, all is well. Verse 27, and when she came to the mountain, to the man of God, she caught hold of his feet. And Gehazi came and pushed her away. But the man of God said, leave her alone, for she is in a bitter distress, and the Lord has hidden it from me and has not told me. Then she said, did I ask my Lord for a son? Did I not say, do not deceive me? He said to Gehazi, tie up your garments. They didn't have email, so they had a guy that could run fast, and they'd tie up their garments. He was fixing to be going to be running, and he was going to run as fast as he could. So he tied up his garments where he could run. The garment, and take my staff in your hand and go. If you meet anyone, do not greet him. If anyone greets you, do not reply. Lay my staff on the face of the child. Then the mother of the child said, as the Lord lives, and as you yourself live, I will not leave you. So he arose and followed her. Gehazi went on ahead and laid the staff on the face of the child, but there was no sound or sign of life. I think this is probably the first staph infection. I don't know. It could be, I don't know. Therefore he returned to meet him and told him, the child has not awakened. When Elijah came into the house, he saw the child lying dead on its bed. So he went in and shut the door behind the two of them, and he prayed to the Lord. Okay, this is a big time. He's probably seen Elijah raise people from the dead. He's probably seen Elijah do a lot of great things, but now the weight's upon his shoulder. But he's remembered that mantle that come down, and Elijah told him, he said, you're going to do even greater things than I've done. Verse 34, then he went up and lay on the child, to putting his mouth on his mouth and his eyes on his eyes and his hands upon his hands. As he stretched himself upon him, the flesh of the child became warm. Then he got up again and walked once back and forth in the house. It's kind of like getting worried here. Ain't nothing happened yet. He went up and stretched himself upon him again. Finally, the child sneezed 7 times, and the child opened his eyes. Then he summoned Gehazi and said, "Call the Shunammite." So he called her, and when she came to him, he said, "Pick up your son." She came. She didn't go right over to her son that's now alive, was dead, now is alive. She came and she fell at his feet, bowing to the ground, and she picked up her son and went out. I pointed out that this woman had everything. Yet this miracle occurs in the one place in her life that she's actually poor and desperate. A person's wealth usually deceives them into feeling that they're self-sufficient, like they could be independent of God. And that was the first sin of Adam and Eve, feeling like they could be independent from God. See, the blessings of God is only found in the place of our weakness. I want you to hear that again. I believe the blessings of God are found in the place of our weakness. In Luke 1:53, He, God, has filled the hungry with good things, but the rich He has sent away empty. You know, there were people that didn't think they needed God. There was people that didn't feel like they needed God's righteousness because they had man's religion. So richness doesn't have to, but richness almost always leads to the feeling of independence. But our sense of richness in those things, you see, is just an illusion, because it could all be gone tomorrow. You can read books all the time about somebody that was very wealthy and rich and lost it all. It's not your weakness that keeps you from the blessing. It's your strength. It's your strength that keeps you from the power of God. And sometimes, like this woman, God allows things in your life that you have no control whatsoever and you can't conquer on your own. Like the death of the child, she was unable to prevent it. Or maybe you went through a divorce that you didn't want and you didn't plan. Or you've got a health situation that right now the doctors are saying there's nothing we can do. Or an addiction that you've not been able to overcome. An inability to achieve your dreams. Or maybe, in fact, you did attain your dreams, but those dreams have not satisfied you at all. You're still haven't found what you're looking for. See, you think you're rich in good works, but the very best of us deserves hell, according to Isaiah 64:6. He said, because you said we're rich spiritually, you don't realize you are poor. If you had owned your spiritual property, He would give you the righteousness of Jesus Christ. That's what He told the Pharisees. It's never our sin that keeps us from heaven. It's our false sense of righteousness. It's our false sense of righteousness. See, we don't know that. In Revelation 3:17, He told one of the churches, "For you say, I'm rich, I have prospered, I need nothing," not realizing that you are wretched, pitiful, poor, blind, and naked. These failures in our life are really God's mercy. They're really God's mercy. You may want to write this one down. If dependence is the objective, if dependence is the objective, weakness then is our advantage. Whatever area you're weak in is to your advantage. I was reading about the biography of Abraham Lincoln, and Lincoln entered the office in 1861 was vastly different than the Lincoln who died in 1865. In that period of time, he'd come into a major relationship with God. The kind of faith that God comes through, you begin to recognize it in the secular inaugural address. And the resolve to God's will toward the end of his presidency simply wasn't there in 1861. The difference, the biographer said, he felt came in 1862 when Lincoln lost his 11-year-old son, Willie. Willie died. And for one of the first times in his life in a long time, Lincoln, he didn't have the power, he didn't have the wealth, he didn't have anything to keep his son alive. Lincoln felt absolutely powerless to do anything about it. His wife went into a deep depression, but the brokenness taught him to seek God, a God bigger than himself. And his newfound belief in God and his purposes gave him the courage to write and develop the Emancipation Proclamation, because he knew God wanted it, and he was determined to stand against the entire country if he had to, because he felt like with God on his side, he could not fail. Here's the one thing. Did you notice in this story, this woman goes by herself? She goes by herself. Her husband doesn't join her. I've been fascinated by the opinions of some people. I think it's more in the South than it is in some other areas of the country, that they feel like women should not have a role in ministry. But I want you to see something. Did you know that in every case except one in the Bible, it is a woman who receives a dead relative back to life? 9 out of 10 people that are raised from the dead are raised from the dead because of a woman. 10 times someone is resurrected from the dead. 9 of them are women that cause this to happen, getting a hold of God. In Hebrews 11:35, it is so important that in Hebrews 11:35, he writes, women receive their dead back to life again. Didn't say men. I guess there's just one. So he said women receive their dead back to life. I begin to think, why? Why is that noted? Why is that important? When Jesus is raised from the dead, it's the women that are there to see him first. Why? Women have often been marginalized in our society. They've been kept at a low place, walked so many feet behind the man. They couldn't even sit in the same place in the temple. They had to sit on the outer courts. Historically, they've been kept out of power. So consequently, they have more readily understood the gospel. The gospel would now even things up. There's no more bond. There's no more free. There's going to be a time that everyone has access to the throne of God. You can now, because of Jesus Christ, you can come boldly to the throne of grace. Whether you have been a slave or a man or a woman or a child, you can come boldly. Historically, they have been kept out of power. And so men who have traditionally had power, it's harder for them to relate to this message in the gospel. We cannot, next point I want to make, we cannot manipulate God, but we can trust him. Elijah doesn't know what to do. He's going back and forth. He tried this, he tried that. This is not a story. This is not a story on how to raise somebody from the dead. If it were, it would be something mechanical. It's not a formula. If you do this, God will do this. That's what we do sometimes with faith. You do A and God will do B. You say, God, my life is good enough. God, I've done enough of right things, and you think you obligated God. We never obligate God. I don't care how long you live for God, how much you work for God, how many times you go to church, how many times you pay tithes. You never obligate God. But gospel faith is not faith in a formula. It is faith in a person. It's a faith in a person. It's faith made in, and how do you get faith in a person? You make room for them to come in your life, and you know them. You know that you know that you know them. This woman knew the prophet. He lived in her life. He was in her heart. She wanted to do stuff for him. She wanted to provide for him because he was blessing her. She was blessing him. He wanted to bless her. But it was no obligation. God is not some vending machine or genie in the bottle that you can rub the right way and he'll do stuff for you. We're all sinners and we often are foolish. So half the time we're not even praying for the right thing. I think we all should keep a journal, and it's a journal that would be named God's Blessings in My Unanswered Prayer. God's blessing in my unanswered prayers. One writer said, sometimes I thank God for unanswered prayers. Just remember when you're talking to the man upstairs, just because he doesn't answer doesn't mean he don't care. Some of God's greatest gifts are unanswered prayers. That's in a song by Garth Brooks. Never thought I'd tell you about Garth Brooks in the sermon today, but I did. The woman trusted God. And that's why she keeps repeating this over and over. All is well, all is well. And the gospel of faith is a mixture of contentment and holy discontentment. And I kind of get it. Different people along the way, they would ask, is your husband well? It is well. It's well. Are you well? I'm well. Is your son well? Yeah, he's well. It's all well. But it wasn't well. In another way, it wasn't well. And that's kind of the way we are. We are human beings that hopefully are being led or guided by God's Spirit. So in the spirit side of us, we should be able to rise up and say, it is well, it is well, it is well. I know what it feels like when I had this shingle thing. I'd come to church and they'd go, how you doing? How you doing? Y'all still do that? Are you doing all right? You ain't going to pass out on the stage today, are you? You know, are you well? You know, you kind of, I appreciate it, but you kind of get tired of it. And you know, if on the way there, they would go, oh, I'm sorry, ma'am. I know somebody died from that. Probably a heat stroke. My uncle died. You know, and like I'd hear some people go, I know somebody had that shingle thing. They got it in their eye, and they had to go to the eye doctor and about got blinded. I know somebody had it for a year. I'm thinking, man, I've got it for a month, and I can't even take it no more. But she put these blinders on. She shut out everybody else like John Wesley's mother did. She shut out everything else, and she said, all I know is I know God, and I know that prophet, and he wouldn't lead me wrong. And all I got to do is get to the prophet. And as she gets there, closer by, you know, his right-hand man, he goes, well, I'm in charge here, and, you know, what do you need? And Gehazi comes out, and he says, I'm the personal assistant to Elijah. What do you need? And she said, I need to see Elijah. And he said, I'm the executive personal assistant to Elijah and the man of God. What's your problem? My problem is you, pal. Get out of the way. I'm going to see Elijah. And you see, faith, gospel faith, is earth-transforming faith. It's like a curious mixture of contentment and holy discontentment. There's a sense deep in your soul that all is well. I want you to get this. This really got to me this week. All is well. There's a lot of junk going on in our country right now, in the world. We could be in World War III before we knew it. But there's one part of me that says all is well. Sherry said one time, you know, if they ever do nuclear weapons, she hopes it hits right over the top of her because she wants to go first. You know? Get it over with, you know. The thing is, it's that feeling, it is well with my soul. Here you see this, what we have to do, and that's what she did, forsaking all, I trust him. Faith, that's what it is, forsaking all, I trust him. Sometimes God answers our prayers by giving us what we would have asked for if we knew what he knew. If we knew what he knew. And so this mixture on the holy side of us, if there is a holy side, we're only holy by his righteousness. Our life, our best day of living for God is filthy rags in God's sight. None of us will be saved if we don't trust in the blood of Jesus Christ. And you know, there was actually a song written about this very story. How many's heard the hymn, It Is Well With My Soul? It's a beautiful hymn. And here's the thing, we got to find a way. Here's some steps we need to do. It's no formula, but we got to start making room for God. Because you never know when you're going to be desperate for God and you're going to need God. But if you haven't built a relationship with him, if you haven't been talking with him every day, if you haven't been shut in with him a lot and know his heart like your own, if you have not been with God, you're not going to have faith to get yourself out of that desperate situation. She shut everybody out and she went to the man of God, and the man of God came and raised her son. And you know, here's the thing. I'm I'm the only one, I don't think I'm the only one here that it's not okay. You know, it's well with my soul, but it's not well in my world. Does that make sense? I know God's got everything in control. But my friend, I can feel good about that. If something happened to me today, I'm going to heaven. So on that part of me, it is well. But there's something over here that drags me down. I don't know if my children are ready yet. I don't know if my grandchildren are ready yet. I don't know if all the loose ends are tied up yet. And so it is well with my soul, but it's not well with my world. And here's the thing I noticed. The closer you get to having that inner sanctum, that room where you make room for God, what will happen? Something will reverse in you. Something will change in you the closer you get to God. At some point, the exact opposite will start taking place in your life. You have a discontentment that comes in this world. If you're not careful and you don't make space, you don't make time, you don't make a room for God, what's going to happen? You're going to be contented with the world we live in. There's too many people contented with the world we're living in. Well, it's okay. Aren't you excited about the rapture? Well, not really, because I got it pretty good here. We should not be contented with this world. But some people are contented with this world. They're contented with not coming to church. They're contented with not bringing their kids to the church. They're contented with just letting their kids play ball every Saturday and Sunday and join all the leagues. And so one day they may be good at sports, but are they going to know God? Because when Jesus comes back, all the money you made, all the trophies you got, all the plaques you've got, all the things you've achieved is going to mean nothing. Paul said his previous life, all that he obtained was dung. And I won't go into what that Greek word means. But it happens sometimes. You know, they used to have them guard tags. This happens. You know, I had one on my car that said grace happens. If you're not careful, you have a discontentment that comes from idolatry and a contentment with the state of the world that grows out of complacency. If you're complacent, you'll just be happy with the world the way it is. But I'm going to tell you, the closer you get to God, you're going to wake up one morning and you're going to go, this world ain't my home. I'm not happy anymore. I can't go another day without talking to my kids or my grandkids about Jesus. Everything, all that really matters is Jesus. We got to get ready to get out of here. You get discontented with the very thing that you were contented with when you make room for God. Pretty soon, you know, you realize that God hates sin because sin is what puts us in the situations we all get in. God hates sin. When the closer we get to God, we will begin to hate some of the very things that we used to love. We'll begin to be discontented with some of the things that used to bring us joy. We'll become discontented because we found something greater, something better. You know, the disciples, they were right with Jesus. Another thing that it requires, you have to stay persistent with God if you're going to get anything. This woman would persist. She persisted. It's like the woman, she went and grabbed a hold of the hem of Jesus' garment. This woman went and grabbed a hold of the prophet, and she goes, I'm going to tell you something. I'm not letting go until you come and raise my son back from the dead. It's all right to be persistent with God. It's all right to put your faith in God. It's all right to be discontented with this world. You know, you can still say it is well, but say, I'm telling you, there's some things that are not well, and I'm going to be going after it like a bulldog until these things in this world change, because I've got to have my kids go to heaven with me, and I've got to have my grandchildren go to heaven with me, and I've got some friends that I want them to go to heaven with me. And I won't be content in this physical body until I know that's going to take place. In 1873, a guy, Horatio Spafford, had some things happen to him, caused him to write a hymn in 1871. The Great Chicago Fire left him financially destitute because he had invested heavily in real estate there. At the urging of D.L. Moody, he decided to leave for England to help them with their evangelistic campaigns. Since he had some business to finish, he sent his wife and children ahead. But the ship sank. His wife survived, but all 4 of his daughters drowned. Earlier in that time, his son died too, before that. Horatio Spafford left almost immediately to join the grieving wife. Along the way, the captain informed Spafford that they were passing the site of the accident. Spafford went down below the deck and wrote these words: "When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul." But I tell you what, when you get to that place in your life, there's some things in your life that's not going to feel well. And one of those things is, after this, he never was happy to just be a businessman ever again. He went and started a mission. And the statement of his heart was, from that day on, it is well. It is well. I'm going to tell you, the worship team will come on up. I want you to get that video ready. I don't even know if we'll have a time for the worship song team, but come on up anyway. I want us to play this old hymn. But you know, when Elijah stretched out his hand upon that child, I want you to think about this. When he stretched out his hands upon that child, hand to hand, face to face, eyeball to eyeball, when he did that, if you were looking down for heaven, you would no longer see that child. You'd just see Elijah. I'm going to tell you, that's a picture of Jesus. Eyes to eyes, nose to nose, mouth to mouth, complete identification. If you look down from heaven at this boy, all you'd see is Elijah. This is how Jesus would save us. He united himself to us completely. Eyes to our eyes, nose to our nose, flesh to our flesh. He took upon himself our flesh, and God made him who knew no sin to become sin for us so that we could become the righteousness of God. A lot of you about my age, you love this, you love the hymns, and we don't do them very often here, but I want you to stand. And we may just go out with this song, because I went over what I told the worship team. I want them to play this song, "It Is Well With My Soul," and think about this guy that penned these words.
When peace like a river